So I love the idea of like dipping in and out of a character's life, just being there for a moment and just like leaving the reader with this really powerful sense or like some kind of emotion, whether they're feeling grief or whether they're feeling joy at the start of a new relationship, or you're kind of just honing in on these really important moments in a life.
Mm.
And I love that feeling, and I
I
love
saw
writing that
that.
stuff.
I saw that you just dive into it.
Yeah,
You just get
yeah,
into that character. I saw that.
yeah. And so for me,
Okay.
it's also maybe.
Hi guys, hello. Hi, it's Penny here, your host of Bookmark Conversations. Today is a very special episode, guys. It's our episode 10 of season 2, and I have our South African acclaimed writer, Alistair Mackay. I'm very, very excited. This is our 10th episode, and he's closing off our season. And also, we'll be talking about short stories, guys. It's very, very close to my heart. I've been talking about it everywhere, and I'm so happy that I'm closing off this show with him today. So please just stay tuned as we dive into all his writing, what inspires him, what makes him tick. We cannot wait to hear what makes him write, so that everybody who wants to go the same route can also, learn a thing or few from him, and take away something from this interview. So without further ado, guys, we'll just dive in and talk to Alistair, and then you know what to do. Comment on our pages if you have anything that you want to ask Alistair. You can still go onto our page and then continue on the conversation. Okay, so we'll just kick off the show now, and with Alistair. Alistair, welcome to the show. Welcome to
Hi,
Bookmark
Penny. Thank you.
Conversations. How are you
Thank you so
today?
much.
How are
It's
you
so
today?
nice to be here. I'm
Yes,
good. I'm
thank
good.
you
Thank
so
you. It's
much.
really lovely to be here chatting to you.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm very, very excited to be talking about The Lucky Ones. The Lucky Ones, your short stories. And the reason for that also is, like I said just now, everywhere last week we had a podcast with the publishers, Penguin Books, and as well as Macmillan. So we had their representative
Okay.
at Exclusive Books last week. So we had a low audience as
Amazing.
well that wanted to, people who were keen to know what goes into the publishing space, and because now we
Yeah.
see this dynamic of people now. It's changed now where people are doing self-publishing and the traditional publishing. I know you are published, but then there are a lot of people
Mm,
that I meet that are self-published, and some are published, and
mm.
but there's a lot of not understanding, what are the differences between the two, and how people can get into that traditional publishing if they want to. And so it's
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
interesting. We spoke about the stories. It was like we had an audience as well as people who were watching at home, whatever. But then we had Exclusive Books. But the short stories came also as well, because we're trying to find that balance, why people are not reading. And also for
Mm,
me, from what I've seen and from people that I've engaged with, people are always complaining about the time that the books are thick, all
yeah.
those kind of things. So whatever
Yeah.
reason that
Yeah.
people will say. So the short stories are, for me personally, are, are the in thing. The thing that we have to
Mm,
actually
mm.
use to actually bring people to reading. So that's why I'm quite very, very
Yeah.
excited. I was like, okay, we are going to be talking about your book and everything else. That you've achieved. You were on Sunday Times, a literary award as well. You did win an award as well. And then, so there's a lot of achievement that you have for yourself, but I'm going to just let you tell us about it. Okay. So my first question, so I have my set questions that I'm going to talk to you about. And then let's just start at the beginning. Your journey to becoming a writer, was it something that you knew that you were talented at writing, or you just had a passion for it, or was it just a love that you developed over time? How was it for you? How did you start your writing?
Yeah, thank you for that. And also thank you for saying that people are excited about short stories. It's very nice to hear. I
Mm,
was quite nervous about bringing out this short story collection because some people I know, like they say, oh, I don't like short stories. I don't want to read short stories. But I also think they're having a moment. I think it's the
mm.
perfect time for them. Everybody's
Perfect time.
busy. No one
Mm,
has time for reading. Yeah.
yes.
You can do a lot. You can do a lot with making people feel in a short space of time. Um, but on my writing journey, I think I'm one of those writers. I think I've always known I wanted to write. I've just always loved telling stories. My mom has still got at home at her house. She's still got a little book that I wrote and illustrated when I was like 5 or 6. And I tried to get that published even. Apparently, I sent it to a bunch of publishers back then, and they let me down gently. They obviously didn't publish it, but I think I've always really enjoyed writing. I wrote a lot of poetry when I was a teenager. And
Mm,
then, like a lot of people, I realized as I became an adult, I thought, I kept getting told you can't make a career out of writing. You've got to do something else. And so it was always just on the back burner. But I kept doing it in the background, and I worked in marketing. So I was doing kind of corporate writing and copywriting and that kind of things.
yes.
Um, but I really wanted to write a novel, and so I then eventually, when I think I was about in my I don't know, about 30. I decided like I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna try follow the dream, and I went to go study creative writing,
Yes.
so that I could have a little bit of help because I didn't really know where to start. I didn't know how to write a
Mm,
novel. I read a lot, but I guess I was reading as just a normal reader. I was reading for the story and I was reading for the characters, but I wasn't thinking about like craft questions like how do you structure the plot and how do
yes.
you pace things and all of that. So I wanted a little bit of help with that. So that's where I went to go study a creative writing degree. I did a master's in creative writing, and during that course, I worked on my first novel, the book that became "It Doesn't Have to Be This Way," which was my first novel. But it
Yes.
was very, very different. So I wrote that as my thesis, and then I chatted to the professors about it. And then once I was finished with that degree, I moved home to South Africa because I was in the US at that point, and I started again. I started from scratch. I threw it all out, and then thankfully everything had fallen into place in my head, and I could write it properly this time, and I didn't have as many struggles. Um, Getting it to work, and the structure made sense and the characters came to me.
Oh,
So it's been
wow.
a long journey. I've been trying to write a novel and try to get a novel published since I was, like I say, like 5 or 6, I think. So it's wonderful that I'm finally able to do it. And then it's a lot easier after the first one. Once I brought
Yes.
out my first book, I realized like I can do this and I kind of know what I'm doing. And so the
Mm.
second one came much more easily. And I'd established a relationship with my publisher at that point. So so she was receptive to hearing from me. So in the beginning, sorry, I think you also asked about publishing, right? So in the beginning,
Yeah, that's
I
what I
was
was going
just
to ask you
sending it
now.
out.
Yes, how is your
Yeah.
what's your take on publishing? I was going to ask you that question. How, your journey into publishing your book. Did you find
Mm, mm,
difficulties? Because there are a lot of people who are thinking that, you know what, yes, you put that sign, Alistair, it's done. There's my manuscript. It's
yeah.
hundreds. And then you send it there, they're like, no, no, it's not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly.
were you rejected? Were you rejected at some
Mm,
point, or you sent back to actually do some
yeah.
changes and then come back, or you were just first time it was taken? How did the process
No,
go
no,
for you?
definitely not first time. Yeah, and I don't know whether I don't know whether I should say this to like aspiring writers because I don't know whether it's going to incentivize them or like make them feel disheartened. But I did get rejected. It was it was a tough journey. One of my classmates, when I was doing my creative writing degree, she, like I said, I was in the States, so she's American, and she had a goal for herself that she wants to get 100 rejections every year. She says
Oh
she's
my
not working
God.
hard enough unless she gets 100 rejections every year. I don't think my self-esteem can handle that.
No,
But
no, no,
but also in South Africa we don't yeah, it's too stressful.
no.
But here we don't
Stressful.
need agents. Like so in the US and the UK you need an agent. So you've also got to try and apply to agents, and then that's a whole nother it's another hurdle on the way to getting published.
Mm.
In South Africa you don't really need agents.
You
You
just
can
go
have an agent
direct.
if you
Yes,
want an
yes,
agent, but you can
yes.
go direct to the publisher.
Direct. Yeah.
And so that at least takes out one of the steps. The first time I sent out my manuscript, it goes into, they call it the slush pile, where it's just like a pile of manuscripts from the random public that they've never heard of. And then someone goes through that slush pile and sees if there's anything that has any promise in it. And so the first time I was rejected, and They didn't say they would have a look at it again, but they did actually. They were quite nice in their rejection, and then they gave me some pointers and things that they think would help the manuscript if I worked on those things. And I did
So
work on
they
those
saw
things, and then
potential
it
in
actually
it.
ended up being a
Yes.
very, very different book.
Yes. That's good. They saw potential
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
manuscript.
and
So they
then
didn't just like goodbye. Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
exactly, exactly.
Okay. At least, yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's good that yours was different because I think then in South Africa, then when a person gets rejected, it's that question of are they being told also why are they being rejected, that you are being
yeah,
rejected, and then instead of you jumping from publisher A to publisher B to publisher C to publisher D, whatever, and then because you're
yeah,
thinking your book
yeah.
is good enough. So is there somebody
Mm,
then telling you that this is why we did not take your book? And
mm,
then are you
mm,
then as a
mm,
writer um open to constructive criticism also, an assistant that you are being offered to say, okay, you know what,
mm,
they might be right, let me go back and then let me
mm,
go fix
mm.
here, and then let me go back to these people and say, okay, I've done my job here again. So I think maybe
Yeah,
this whole
yeah,
thing of self-publishing and traditional publishing, it also it doesn't give people the chance as well to actually go back to their story to say maybe my plot was not good, maybe my ending it needs a little bit of
yeah.
change. Yeah, so if there's now this openness, like people can just self-publish, then I think you thinking
Mm,
you're good enough, then you are just passing your book, and then if somebody's taking it to the shelf,
mm.
selling it from the booth, it's okay, somebody's buying it, I'm happy, you know
Yeah,
or I'm
yeah,
selling it online. So
yeah.
I think it's still that whole, it's a big debate. So that's what we said, with the publishers. I
Mm,
said it is a big debate because you find that your book cannot, your friend, like your friend, can be rejected a couple of times, but
mm,
then he goes
mm,
self-published, and guess what? His book gets popular
mm,
and he
mm.
gets a lot of money than they. You understand? So there is that
Yeah,
line,
yeah, yeah,
So I said
absolutely.
now it
Mm.
is, it is that line, but it depends. But with you, you've studied creative writing, so it's a good thing. It's
Mm.
a good thing. So your experience in the US in terms of
Mhm.
writing, what would you say, your experience compared to here, like readers, writers, how is that compared to here? Is the community vibrant there? They're reading a lot because there's a lot of books in terms of like fiction, more especially fiction. A lot of it, like
Mm,
I have a
mm,
book club, so
mm.
most of the books, when we are
Yeah.
selecting a book, we are always looking at overseas because that's the best. The
Mm,
best comes from there.
mm.
In South Africa, we still, yes, people are transitioning into that, but we are not there yet. So, how is it,
Yeah.
the community there in terms of reading, in terms of writing? Is it very, very, very
Mm.
vibrant compared to here?
Yeah, I did find that. I was in New York, which is it's just such an incredible city. So there's just so much going on, and there's so many writers who live in New York. So
Mm.
the course itself was really like was brilliant, and they have quite a big faculty. And as you say, I think we're getting established in South Africa, and we're getting there, but we're just starting a bit later. I
It's
know the
very
whole
late.
creative
Yeah.
writing field.
Mm.
Yeah, the whole
Yeah.
creative writing field in the US has been going for a long time. All of the universities have a department that offers creative writing, and I think they have been doing that since like the 1950s. So there's a
Sure.
lot of infrastructure that supports writing,
Mm.
and New York itself, there are so many writers, like I said, that you can on a random Thursday night every week or like any night of the week, there'll just be like very famous, world famous writers giving a reading at a bookshop down the road from you, or uh, or
Mm.
students giving readings from their work at a little dive bar near your apartment. So there's always something that you
Always
can go and see
something
or someone.
happening. Oh, that's nice. That's
Yeah,
okay.
which
So
is very cool. Yeah.
my next question is, who are the writers or books that have helped shape your unique voice as an author? So who are they? Locally or internationally, it doesn't matter. But who are those authors that have shaped you, who you are? Because I'm sure you're looking up to somebody,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah. Or your
Yeah, no,
favorite
there's
authors.
a few.
There's a
There's a
few.
lot. There's
Okay.
a lot. I'm trying to narrow it down in my head.
Okay.
I think probably the biggest influence on me especially in the early years, was Margaret Atwood. I really, really love Margaret Atwood's fiction, especially her dystopian Handmaid's Tale kind of. I haven't actually seen the TV series, but I love the
Series.
book. And
Mm.
Yeah, and Oryx and Crake, it's another book that she wrote that I loved. So for my first book, which was also a dystopia set in the future in Cape Town, I think I was influenced a lot by Margaret Atwood's writing. Um, uh, I really like Richard Powers. He writes a lot about nature in a way that I really, really enjoy. I also like to write about nature. And then another American writer that I really love is Garth Greenwell. I'm not sure if you know Garth Greenwell, but he writes about queer relationships in a way that I find very
Mm,
compelling,
okay.
very like brutally honest and very like doesn't sugarcoat anything. Um, Locally, I guess Case Dacre was a big influence for me back in the day. 13 Cents, I thought was a brilliant, brilliant book. Um, Damon Galgut, I think his work is incredible. I really, really enjoy it as
You
well.
enjoyed his
Trying
work.
to think,
Okay.
there's many writers that I like. Who are some of
Okay.
your favorites?
Yeah. Oh my God. So, okay. So I'm a thriller lover. So,
Oh
it's
yeah,
known.
yeah.
I'm like a thriller lover. So, it's oh gosh, it's mostly international authors that are my
Okay.
favorite authors. Karen Slaughter is my biggest fan.
Yeah.
I'm a biggest fan of Karen
Yeah.
Slaughter. She writes so beautifully, and the way she executed, her writing, her investigations and all those kind of things. And the
Mm.
catch also TM Logan. I love him. I love TM Logan because
Okay.
he writes also
Okay.
in the same genre. So even though
Yeah.
I read a lot of I read so many books, because of the
Mm,
book club,
mm,
but I have my own
mm.
specific one. But in South Africa, I love Angela Makholwa. I don't know if you know her. Angela Makholwa, there's also they adapted
Yeah.
his series, her book also into one of the Netflix series. What
Oh,
is it?
amazing.
Yes, the Red Ink. It's the Red Ink. They adapted
Oh,
one
yes, yes.
of her
Okay.
books into a series called Red Ink on Netflix. So yeah, so there are local authors that I like, but I'm a thriller lover. I'm really,
Okay.
really known for that. But then it's good with the book club for me because then now I saw my transition to actually be not necessarily forced to, but also to look at other genres, try to, because
Mm,
some people don't even like fiction. They like non-fiction.
yeah.
And if we choose
Yeah. Yeah.
non-fiction that month, I need to come up with something centered around the thing. And it's hard, it's very, very hard.
Yeah.
So then
Yes.
now I get to then tap into different genres now because of romance.
Okay.
I also, like some people love romance, and I
Yeah.
have to, I have to, I have to also like. But I'm a thriller lover. So yeah. So,
Okay.
anyways,
I'm also in two book clubs, and in both of them we all I think like your one, we all have to read the same book. So we have an election every month, and then we
yeah.
nominate books, and then the one that gets the most votes gets wins. So I'm
Oh,
often reading things I would never have read otherwise, but it's great because it like expands my horizons.
exactly, me
Yeah.
too. So it's ours work exactly the same as yours. So it's three
Okay.
books.
Yeah.
So if it's
Yeah.
Alistair's turn to choose this month, Alistair will pitch
Mhm.
three books that are of, but
Okay.
we have themes per se. So we will know, like for
Okay.
instance, now it's June. June
Yeah.
will say, okay, we are trying to broaden it. I'm making an example. We'll say, okay, it's June month, so it's Youth Month in South Africa. So choose
Mm.
a book that centers around youth. So it can be any genre per se. It can be thriller, can be anything, but make sure that it centers around the theme that's been chosen. If it's a
Okay.
Women's
Yeah.
Month, if it's Women's Month, any genre, so it opens up, the whole thing. So you can choose
Yeah.
non-fiction, fiction, whatever, but so long the main character, it centers
Yeah.
around that specific individual, a female.
Okay.
If it's
I
so
like
that's what
that.
it, or if it's
Yeah.
what's this a Father's Day month, or I'm making an
Mm.
example also.
Mm.
Last year we had that. Then we'll say the character must be a male. Everything must center around
Yeah.
a male. So whichever genre you like, it doesn't matter. So long he is the
Yeah.
focus of the story,
Okay.
it's a male. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I like
so
that.
you've written both novels and short stories. What do you think short stories offer that novels don't, they or can't? So, and as a writer, is there a certain freedom or challenge in telling a complete world in just a few pages? So, is there a challenge? Because now you've written
Yeah.
a novel, and then is there a challenge for you? Was it a challenge for you transitioning from a novel into short stories?
So I think not really actually. I really like both forms. I like playing with both forms, and I think the whole time I've been working on my novels, I've been writing short stories also in the background. Um,
Mm,
I think short stories may become more naturally to me because um, I guess the thing that I think works so well about short stories is that well, the ones that I like to read, and so the ones that I try to write as well, is that you can get a lot of feeling across in a short space of time. And so I
mm,
love the idea of like dipping in and out of a character's life, just being there for a moment and just like leaving the reader with this really powerful sense or like some kind of emotion, whether they're feeling grief or whether they're feeling joy at the start of a new relationship, or you're kind of just honing in on these really important moments in a life.
mm.
And I love that feeling, and I
I
love
saw
writing that
that.
stuff.
I saw that. You just dive into
Yeah,
you just get
yeah,
into that character. I saw that.
yeah. And so for me,
Okay.
it's also maybe a little bit. I mean, I don't do it because it's easier, but I think it's also maybe a little bit easier because there's not as many moving parts. In a novel, you're trying to keep track of all these different storylines and who said what when, and when did this character meet that character, and when did this
Yes.
thing happen to this other person. I had to have a whole big cork board in my home study thing when I was writing my book with like when you see like investigators in a TV show trying to find a
Yeah,
murderer or
yeah.
something. It was like that. There are all these things pinned up to my corkboard so that I know that when all these stories intersect. So a novel is just
Yeah.
much more complicated, and you've got to keep so
Yes.
many more
Yes.
things in your head.
Mm.
And a short story allows you to maybe just focus in on something. It's a little bit like purer in that sense. You can just focus in on a pure moment in someone's life.
Exactly.
Uh, and then I do try and write them in a way that even though you're only with this character for a short period, you understand them deeply, and you understand, where they come from, and how they think, and how they feel. It's like almost a challenge that I set for myself, that the character is
Yeah.
very vivid and very clear in a short period of time.
It's good. It's good.
Um,
It's good. You know what? You mentioned something earlier on. You were saying that it's talking about the short stories, and I said it is the time for short stories. It is. And the reason being, we
yeah,
discussed it even last week with the a whole panel of people, whatever. We were talking about that how can we get people, more young people, more especially, to read.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I even made an example with myself that my son
Mm,
knows that mommy's library. I have my student is books from there to the end, but
mm,
he will
mm.
hardly come here. He doesn't come here.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
fixated onto his games. That's the only thing that he does.
Mm,
Or only read the book for school. That's the only thing that he's
yeah,
reading. The school book, English
yeah.
book, if there's an English book, that's it. He will never. So how
Mm,
do we bring them into reading?
mm,
And that is
mm,
what we discuss. So that's why I'm saying this now is the perfect time
mm,
for short stories. It is that time,
mm.
because now we need
Yeah.
to bring them in to read. And remember, they lose focus very quickly. They don't want, they
Mm,
are on these platforms very quickly, looking at this, and then they're tapping onto the next thing. So guess what? The short
yeah,
story does that. So you quickly put them
yeah,
into the story, then they glue, and then it's the next one. So it is the
yeah,
perfect time for short stories. I've been saying this to everyone that, guys,
yeah.
please, can you come back to short stories? People do not have time. People now are glued on these TikTok things. Let's give them the
Mm,
books they are
mm,
that are TikTok. The short story is
mm.
the TikTok.
Yes.
It's
It's
the
the
TikTok.
TikTok of literature.
It is
Yeah,
TikTok of
totally.
literature. So let's give them
Yeah.
what they want to see. So that at the end of the day, you guys are writers. We are readers. I'm not a writer. I'm not an author. I'm a reader. So as a
Mm,
reader, I advocate reading. So that's what I do. I
mm,
advocate reading, that we have authors that are writing, guys, please buy books, do this, do that. So that's what I do.
mm,
So now how do I get people to read?
mm.
So people know Penny as a reader.
Yeah.
So the minute they see me in
Mm,
maybe public places, they'll be like, Penny, we so want to read. We don't have time. And then I'll say, get a small book, get a tiny book. So that's why
yeah.
then I started
Yeah.
telling everyone that I speak to, that, guys, authors need to start writing short stories. We need to bring people
Mm,
to read. And this, what you are
mm.
doing is amazing. That's why I was saying that I'm happy that I'm closing season 2 with you, because your short stories are amazing. And the way you start off with them,
Thank you. Thank you.
they just get onto it, get on with it. And then you don't like start maybe telling you just get on with it, and then you tell us the story about the person. And we don't
Mm,
lose
mm.
track. I want to ask you that question. It's on a later stage, I will. Because even
Yeah.
though your stories are short, but you just
Mm.
get on with it, but we don't get lost. in the story.
Mm,
So you have that
mm.
art of doing that. It's
Okay.
amazing.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing. It's
Thank you.
amazing.
That's
Okay,
very cool
so
to hear. And I
yeah.
think, sorry, on that point though, I think that's the great thing about short stories. I'm also using them. Some of my friends who don't like to read too much or they don't have time
Yes.
anymore to read, I say some of the stories in this collection are very, very short. They're like 3 or 4 pages. Some of them are longer, some of them are like 20 pages, but some of them
Mm.
are super, super short. So I'm like, just read that one. You see how you go. And
However,
then you kind of and then I think people can get hooked. So, like my partner, when we're watching TV series, he never wants to watch a movie. He says a movie's
yes,
too long. But then we'll end up watching series for like 3 hours. So you've ended up spending more time than if you just watched the movie. So maybe short stories can
100%.
be the same thing. It's like a short individual piece, but you might end up reading the whole book in one sitting because you're enjoying it.
Yes,
So
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Okay,
yeah.
so reading stories, all the characters carry this real honest humanness on the fever
Mhm.
tree, right? On
Mhm.
the fever
Mm.
tree.
Okay.
So all characters carry this real honest humanness. Nothing feels like what's the word, like performative or forced, if you get what I mean. So
Okay.
I find
Yeah.
myself then attached to characters in just a few pages, then I find myself attached to characters. How do you go about developing your characters in short stories, basically? Because now you're creating these characters that are going to be ending just now. So how do you go about,
Yeah.
is this an art, or is it because you've written so many short stories, then you then inherits, or then you have this skill to actually do that, what you are doing? Is that a skill that you acquire on the time? Because there are a lot of young people who honestly wants to do what you do, and
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
people, then I know some of them who have written poetry or whatever, and sometimes you get lost, in those kind of things.
Mm.
So now when I
Yeah.
was reading your one, I was like, no man, so we do need
Yeah.
some people who are people to look up to, like you. I know that there are young people that I'm going to refer them to you, if you don't mind, maybe inbox you, not to crowd you,
Mm.
but to just
Mm.
inbox
Yeah.
you and just ask you a few questions, in terms of their writing,
Yeah.
because
Sure.
they are writing short stories or short poetry as well. So maybe they can reach out
Yeah.
to you and just read but I'm suggesting they need
Mm.
to get your books. They need to read it first,
Mm.
and then they get to understand, compare with what they've written or what they're doing,
Mm.
and then they can
Mm.
ask you questions as well. How to
Mm.
actually stay in line, not for us to lose track of what they are telling us in those short stories at the same time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll be happy to answer those questions, and thank you for saying that. That's really nice to hear. I I think so. I think one of the things that's most important for being a writer is that you've got to be observant. You've got to be like paying attention to the world around you and to the people
Mm.
around you and taking note of things. So for me, I don't. You said, you build this character even though I know that the story's going to end in a few pages. I try not to think about the fact that the story's going to
Okay.
end in a few pages because
Okay. Okay.
I don't want to put myself off from investing too much in the character. I think I've got to feel like I've created a character that is believable and deep and has real emotions, just like I would in a novel. Um,
Mm.
and so I guess for me, maybe that's a combination of observing people in the world. Often for me, short stories are inspired by a situation that I see or a person that I meet very briefly, and then I sort of picture what their whole life is like and what it's like to be inside their head. Um, and I also think you always need to put a little bit of yourself in your characters for them to feel real. So I think I always try and, like method actors, when they get a role for a movie and then they go and like try and live like that character in
Like
the
that
world for a bit
character,
to see what it feels
yes.
like.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I sort of do that
Mm-hmm.
with my writing. I sort of just try and really imagine what it's like so I put my character in a certain situation with a
Mm.
certain background and certain characteristics and stuff. But then I try and imagine what it feels like to be in their skin at that moment. And then
Okay.
I think that really helps make them feel real.
Yes,
I hope
real,
it seems to
real
be
as
working.
well. Yes, that is amazing. Your
Yeah.
writing is descriptive in the most incredible way.
Mm.
The language pulls you into the scene, basically. So without ever like over
Okay.
explaining, and it lets you
Mm.
experience the character's emotions. So what I wanted to ask you, is this a conscious technique that you use in your stories? For example, Jeremy
Hmm.
lay down on his back and closed his eyes. He imagined roots growing from his fingertips to his toes. Yeah. So that's what I wanted. So what I wanted, yeah, to understand. So you are very, very descriptive. But in the
Mm.
most in a nice way. You understand? Not too much,
Okay. Yeah.
or not like
Yeah. Okay.
overperforming, like when when you are describing a situation or a person or an event in your
Mm,
book.
mm,
So that
mm.
is maybe
Okay.
it also goes with the question that what I was asking you earlier, that I think you have a skill when it comes to that. And it's something that you should not take
Mm,
very, very lightly, because I think you can give back so much to so many people who are
mm,
writing. We have so many aspiring authors, so many people who wants to
mm.
write. And I think with the tone
Yeah.
and the way you are writing, there's a lot of people that can actually gain from what you are doing, if they
Okay.
just apply their mind and also be open to actually asking the right questions as well, if they want to grow their
Yeah.
craft, if I can put it
Yeah.
like that,
Yes.
or their
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah.
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 And I
So,
also think writers need to read a lot, right? I think it's very, very important to read as much as you can because
mm,
you see what you as before, well, not before writing, while writing, but I think writers need to be readers. So we need to see what work is being produced and we need to see what works for us. And like it helps get a sense of what we think is our style as well, seeing what works and what doesn't work and why we think it works and why it doesn't work.
mm,
Um, in terms of like balancing description versus the other elements of the story, I suppose. I don't know if I have a neat answer for that. I think I just got to feel it out, you know. I
yeah.
do obsess about my writing and I go over it over and over and over and over again until it feels perfect. I can't
Mm.
move on until it feels good, but I don't know what it is that makes it feel good. I guess I've just got to feel it out and feel what the right balance is between like a description and something else that's happening in the story.
How long does it take for you? How long did it take for you to write The Lucky Ones?
So it's tough to answer that with a story collection because I
Yeah,
didn't
the
write them
story
all in one
collection.
go.
How
But I didn't
long
write
did
them
it
all in
take?
one
Yeah,
go. So I
story
have
collection. Yeah. When you put it together now to say, okay, now how long did it take you?
it's yo, I don't know. So some of the stories I had written before. So I've been writing. Some of these stories are I've been working on stories like I said for the last few years. So it's hard to know.
Mm.
Often when I was struggling with my novels, or when I had writer's block, or I was really not coping
I
with my
was gonna
novel and it
ask
wasn't
you
going
that.
well, then I would work on a short story in the background.
Okay.
So some of them are from the same time that I was working on the child, and
Okay.
it doesn't have to be this way. So it's hard to put all the time together. I'm not sure. But then I suppose about half of them are
Mm.
were written specifically for this collection. And those, I don't know, I guess maybe about like 9 months to get it to
Okay.
the point where I was happy with it.
Okay. Almost a
Yeah.
year. Okay. So it took you almost a year.
Mm,
So you did reach
yeah.
a writer's block at some point in your novel.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have writer's block. It's so frustrating when it happens, but it
What happened?
it definitely happens.
What do you do? Okay, so for Alistair, then once that happens, then you shift onto doing something else, another project, and just leave it, and then come back.
Mm.
Is that
Yeah,
your okay, your trick?
I've tried a few things. I mean, usually, even though I just said that to you, I usually forget that, and I usually like first knock my head against the wall, and I keep trying over and over again to make something work, and it's not working. And then I remember that I can actually take a break, and it helps my brain to think about something else for a little bit. So often
Okay.
I like go for a walk. I think that's my first thing that I try to do is to go for a walk somewhere along the coast or on the mountain or something, clear my head. And then, yeah, I find writing short stories really, really helps me because then I can dip
Mm,
into other projects and a different world that I've created, and then maybe that'll flow more easily, and then I can come back
yes.
to the main novel.
Ah, that's
Um,
amazing. Sure.
I'm also trying to become the kind of writer who just keeps going because I think it's better to just do that, to just keep going to write, and then even if it's not perfect, you just move on to the next scene and then go back and edit at a later point. But I really
Mm,
struggle with that. I always want to like make sure that the section I've just written is really good before I move on to the next section. But I think it's better to try and get into the flow and just work on it. And even if the first draft is messy, you can come back. That's what I'm trying
okay.
to work towards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to talk about the scene of queerness and identity in the collection. The lucky
Hmm.
and in the collection, the lucky ones, right? The lucky ones explores queerness in such a grounded, lived way. Queerness is never sensationalized, it's simply lived. How intentional are you about
Mm.
portraying queerness as part of the ordinary? And do you ever feel pressure to represent something or something or in particular, with that? There is somebody, in fact, who wrote a book that I interviewed Sia Kumalo.
Oh yes, I know
That
Sia.
was
Yeah.
one of the best interviews that I've had. Such an amazing guy. And he has so
He's
much to
great.
say. He had so much to say. So so when I was reading and then I was looking at this question, I was like, even an hour with him, which was like, oh, are we done? This was just 1 hour. And the way he had
Yeah.
so much to say, and his book is very, very relevant, even to what's
Mm.
happening today. I feel like, just go back to his book and read his book. There's so much there. So yeah, so I just wanted to
Absolutely.
talk to you about just on that question, just to
Mm.
ask you if you've ever felt pressure to represent something, like in particular in terms of those topics.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Firstly, I agree. Sia is wonderful. Um, I don't feel pressure. In fact, if anything, I feel pressure the other way. So I do. My both of my novels and a lot of the stories in the collection are focused on queer characters, and that is intentional for me because I guess firstly, I don't think there have been enough stories about queer people yet.
Yeah,
It's
yes,
still
100%. Yeah.
yeah, it's still not considered mainstream to a lot of people. I think a lot of people still think it's really strange or really niche, or they don't understand the queer experience, or they
Mm,
think that we are very, very different from everybody else. And so I guess what I'm trying to show is that in some ways, obviously we've had queer people have had very different experiences growing up, and there's often a lot of trauma associated with that. But that in other ways, we're all the same. I think deep down, if you strip down all the layers of identity and experience, we're all the same, and we all want the same things. We all want to be loved. We all want to be understood. We all want to feel some sense of family and community. And so I suppose I'm trying to show characters who are striving for that. And even if their life looks very different from a reader's life, I hope that there's something that they can connect with in that, or some feeling that they are familiar with.
mm.
Um, so it has been intentional for me, and I do want to show both sides of it. I want to show, um, like I said, the specific experiences that maybe have been challenging for queer people, but I also want to show the ways in which sometimes a person's just it's just a queer person, and that's not really that interesting. That's just a part of their life, and
Yes.
that's not the main point of the story at all. It's just
Mm,
it's just a normal
mm.
part of their life.
Yes.
Um, and there's also I mean, there's a lot to this. Sorry, I could keep going, but there's also, like in queer literature, there's been a lot of writing about trauma and pain and being closeted and how hard it is to come out to our families, which is all very important and necessary. But there's also this, a lot of people are saying now we need to have more queer joy in literature, and so I'm also trying to show both like the whole spectrum of
The
human
whole
emotion as
spe
well.
Yes, the whole spectrum. Yeah, so Fever
Yeah.
Tree covers just a day and a half of Jeremy's life. And in that
Mm,
story, there's so many themes, and you touched on it now. There's so
mm,
many themes
mm.
such as grief, mental health, queerness, and even
Mm.
climate change. I think it's a
Yeah.
reflection of what it means to be human. So you're right with what you are saying just now, that
Mm.
it was intentional and also just to portray exactly that it's human, like it's being human
Mm.
basically. So
Mm.
it's
Mm.
everything happening, it's all happening at once. It's dealing with grief
Mm.
whilst coming to
Mm.
terms with the fact that, you know what, life goes on. Whilst you are in
Mm.
that boat, you agree, but life goes on. So it's all that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you're feeling like although I'm stuck here in my grief or whatever it is that's happening, life
Mm.
is moving on. The world is still
Mm.
moving. Yeah. So I'm curious to know how you manage to weave all these themes, in a single story without it feeling being heavily like hangled, if you get what I mean. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, thanks. I think sometimes when I write stories, it's Actually, I think quite often for me, it's kind of like quite a subconscious thing. I'm not even really fully aware of what's going on when it's happening. I'm just trying to process something or just trying to explore something. Um, I was uh, in that story in particular, Fever Tree. I was try. I struggle with my own mental health quite a lot, and I have an anxiety disorder, and I've experienced grief. I mean, most of us have experienced grief. And so I suppose
Yes.
I was just trying to figure out a way to tell the story to convey what it feels like to go through that. Um, and it almost just in Jeremy's sort of unraveling in that story, the kinds of things he thinks about and the kinds of things he notices just felt natural to me. I didn't feel like I was trying to insert themes about climate change or anything like that. It was just that he was feeling so fragile already, and he kept trying to turn to nature to try and make him feel more grounded and more whole.
Mm.
I guess it just made sense for me that he would then think about how even nature is like losing its ability to heal us, and because we're overpowering it, and it
Yeah.
was almost just like a just following the train of thought as to where it went. So I guess maybe it's like starting with the character and what they're going through is then what determines the themes that come through in the story.
Mm.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't realize I thought that, but
Yeah.
that's what I think.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's good. In the story featuring Greg and Thapelo, you explore
Mm,
interracial dynamics,
yes.
layered with queerness and cultural tension. Do you think Thapelo struggles with empathy towards Greg? Greg feels that Thapelo interprets what he says as an attack. So what?
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Oh, so that story is called "Why Don't South Africans Read Fiction?" I was thinking about that
Yes.
when you were telling me about your book club when people don't want to read fiction.
Yes.
Um, uh, I don't think I don't think Tapelo is an unempathetic person. I think their relationship is going through a tricky patch, and I think a lot of relationships go through difficult periods where people talk past each other or can't understand each other or aren't hearing each other properly. And so the moments that I wanted to explore in their relationship was a moment where they feel like they're not really getting each other and they're not really understanding each other properly. And so they
Mm,
do feel like there is this gap between them that they really wish that they could um, bridge. But I don't think Tapelo is lacking in empathy. I guess at that moment he's feeling quite frustrated by Greg. But the whole I guess point of that story is to try explore empathy as an idea, and that's I think in South Africa it is an issue for us because we come from such a divided place and
mm,
we have such different experiences. And so I think there is a bit of an empathy problem in South Africa in terms of like trying to understand what it's like for someone who's very, very different from yourself. And so I was sort of trying to show that through their working through things in their personal relationship, in their private relationship, it's almost like a metaphor for the whole country,
yeah.
and in trying to understand the humanity in each other and understand where each other is coming from.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, like also whilst we are on that story, why South Africans don't read fiction? Why are they? Do you think they're
Mm.
still stuck on non-fiction? You really captured something so honest about the local reading landscape. What do you think fiction, is overlooked in South Africa? In your opinion, why do you think we're still stuck in non-fiction? Why? Because last week
So,
I'm
um,
asking this because one of the our questions, I think, at the end when we're finishing the podcast with the publishers, I asked them this
mm,
question. I said to them, "What do they think? Like in 100 years' time, is going to
mm,
change in terms of African literature? What do they think? What
mm,
can they see changing? And one of the things that
mm,
they mentioned as these big publishing houses that we know, they
mm.
said they mentioned a couple of things. You can maybe, I think that podcast we're dropping it next week. You can have a look at that
Okay.
podcast because they are mentioning a
Yeah.
couple of things. But one of the main things is what I'm asking you now because they are saying they are
mm,
seeing a shift, a big shift in terms of us seeing all these books. When you enter exclusive books, you see these
mm,
biographies, you see all these struggle, apartheid, and all these things. I think we've been given too much information on that. I'm not saying people
mm,
now say, okay, no, Penny said this, whatever. No, no, no. I'm saying we still have, maybe some people still have stories to tell, but also I
mm,
really think it's our time also as South Africans to actually shift our focus now, to actually now look at like fiction, because it's good.
mm.
It's good. It's good. We
Yeah,
mustn't look overseas all the
yeah.
time. So in your
Mm,
in your
mm.
view, why do you think we're still stuck in, in writing about all these things that are the past, and it's present. I'm not saying past is not present. Like, I'm saying, people must not get me
Yeah.
wrong, but I'm saying, why are we
Mm,
focusing a lot on that writing? When you're entering the store, it's all about
mm.
Penny's life, Alistair's life, Alistair's journey, why
Yeah,
are we there?
yeah,
Why
yeah.
can't we move away from that? Why, in your
Mm.
opinion, do you think we still stuck there as as South Africa as a country? Why are we there, not moving?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't know if I have the answers. I think it's definitely unusual, you know. So most in almost I think in almost every other country, fiction sells more than nonfiction, and South Africa
Hmm.
is not like that. I think people here love biographies, as you said, they love like
Yeah.
reading about sports stars or like business biographies or whatever it is. So I don't know. I have a couple of theories. So the one theory in that story that I put across in that story was that we find it very difficult to uh, imagine someone's life if they're a very different kind of person from us. I think it
From
makes us
us,
maybe feel very
yes.
uncomfortable.
Yes.
Um, so I think maybe that's one of the elements of it. I also think there's been an issue in terms of, I guess, the transformation of the industry, that maybe a lot of the writers weren't writing the kinds of stories that were relevant to younger people or to Black readers, for example, you know. So I think
Yeah.
hopefully there's a shift now where people are telling the kinds of stories that will appeal more, and maybe the kinds of
Yes.
stories that were being written in the past weren't appealing. You know, they didn't feel like they were relevant, or they didn't capture the kind of humanity that readers are looking for in a fictional piece of story. So
Hmm.
maybe that's changing. I hope that's changing.
I
And
hope
then you also
so.
touched on the point about reading internationally. I think that's also been a very strange thing about South Africa, that we have this view that I don't know, that we're not good enough, that we have to read books from elsewhere if
From elsewhere.
those are where the real
We
art
have
is
to
being
read it,
made, you know.
Daniel Steele.
But
We have
that's
to read
not.
it. Exactly. We have to read it,
Yes,
Daniel Steele, for so many years. Like, why? Why is she keep on
yes,
writing and the
yeah,
books are all over and people are buying them? People have
yeah,
collection of Daniel
yeah.
Steele. I mean, for how many years is that gonna
I
are
know.
that gonna go on? It's too much. It's too much. I think we
It
need
is
to,
too much.
it's too much. We need to embrace. I don't know. I don't know. I think there is a something huge, but that's why when I threw the question
Mm,
at them, I said, in 100 years' time, it might not be your time, my time, it's somebody else's time now. So
mm,
this is my last question to
mm,
you. What do you
mm,
see? And they
mm.
mentioned that, and they also mentioned the shift, the big shift, and they are saying that they are seeing, the different types of genres coming up, like fantasy,
Mm,
those
mm.
kind of genres, all those kind of things. So
Yeah.
because even though now I see the fiction coming up, but we're still a little bit
Mm.
stuck in our cultural fiction, if you get what I mean. So it's more
Yeah.
cultural
Yeah.
fiction that is coming up, it's on the rise. But then now we just want
Mm,
to
mm.
see those types, like I was saying, my favorite TM Logans, like me, Thriller Lava. So then those ones who
Yeah.
goes deep, do the investigation, because those ones require a lot of work for us to be in the scenes. They take us into the scene.
Mm,
If it's in New Zealand, I'm somewhere like they. I can see, I know New
mm.
Zealand without me being there, because they do their work.
Yeah.
They do their work. They take you there.
Yes.
So I think it's all maybe all linked also to people studying, like you, are you creative writing? Now you are
Mm,
picturing your scenes. You want the reader to be there in the story, because
mm,
that's what I like.
mm,
I like to be actually in the book. Take me
mm.
inside the book. So I think that's where people need to actually,
Yeah.
I don't know, get themselves into that stage where they're able to be descriptive enough to capture the author, I mean, the reader.
mm,
The author must capture us. So that's
yeah,
the difficult part, I think,
yes,
when it comes to fiction, because that's where we want to get
mm,
lost as readers. So it's easy to write
mm,
nonfiction because it's the truth. You are writing the
mm,
truth most of the time. So
mm,
a biography, whatever. But
yeah,
here, you must take the
yeah,
person to be on a different world. And then now you must do your work. So
mm,
that's where it all comes in, because you
mm,
can't just write something you have not I mean, researched. You have to research it thoroughly before you bring
mm,
us to that. So I see a lot of cultural fiction,
yeah,
something that we can relate to in a way. So we are not there yet. So maybe in
yeah,
a few years, I don't know, maybe we'll be there.
yeah.
Okay, so
No,
what
you're
do
right.
you,
I think fiction
yeah,
you've got to create a whole world for the reader. It's a whole
yes,
immersive experience, and so yeah, the
exactly.
writer's got to do a
You
good job of
must.
that. Otherwise, people aren't going to want to read it.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
What do you hope readers walk away, after reading your stories? What do you hope they walk away with reading your stories, your short stories?
So I think the first thing I want readers to walk away with is feeling like they've been on an emotional journey. I want them to walk away feeling deeply about various different things. Um, I would love them to feel like they recognize, like I was touching on earlier, our common humanity, that that even
Mm,
if our lives are very different, we all go through similar things in our inner life, in our inner world. Um, I think maybe a sense of hope. I think a lot of my stories, characters are really struggling either with difficulties that they're going
yes,
through or to
yes,
connect with each
different,
other. But I think
yes,
in a lot of them,
yes,
I'm trying to give a sense of hope that we can get through this and that there's a path through these difficulties. And I
yeah.
guess maybe that's it. Maybe those are the things that I
Those are the
hope for
things.
the readers to get. Yeah.
For emerging writers, particularly queer or
Hmm.
or South African writers, what's one thing you wish someone told you when you were starting out? What is that one thing that you wish that somebody looking back, or is there even that? That I wish that someone told me this before I started writing. Is there something like that for you?
Hmm. I think probably the advice that I wish I'd received was that is not to try and replicate what exists in the world. I think when I was starting out writing, I was trying to almost write in the style of certain other writers or trying to do things the way other writers do it. And I think it's better I think we should, like I was saying earlier, I think we should
Mm,
read very widely as we can. But I think it's more important to try and figure out what you want to say and what your unique perspective is and
yeah.
what experiences you've had you can bring to life through the stories that you're telling. I think maybe that would have
Yes.
helped.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're
And also
finding
that
your
it really
unique.
helps to,
Mm. I
yeah.
was just saying
And that it
that
also, oh,
uniqueness,
sorry.
yeah. No, I'm saying that
Yes,
uniqueness
yes,
as
yes.
well, because that is one of the other questions that we asked I asked the publishers last week, that how do you, like, what's this? When you get a manuscript, you've received so many
Mm,
manuscripts, right, over the years.
mm,
How
mm,
do you
mm.
identify that one that is authentic? Because now we're living in the AI world. That's another thing. People are writing
Yeah,
whatever it is that
yeah.
they are writing. I don't know if somebody can write a book using an AI. Honestly, I don't know. But I think people use
Mm.
AI for
I
so
hope
many
not.
different
Mm,
reasons. So how do you find that
mm,
authentic one and separate it from the rest? How do you say this
mm,
is
mm.
unique? And they had so many
Yeah,
answers. They said they will know that
yeah,
this one,
yeah.
everyone will get a yes, will say a yes from different departments from that particular one. So
Mm,
they were giving the audience the message that
mm,
whatever it is that you're writing, you must always remember, like you are saying, people must read. Because what if you are writing somebody asked that question,
mm.
what if you're writing a book but you don't know that somebody is writing something similar? Somebody asked the question. So how would
Yeah,
you know? Then you take my book, you like it, and then you
yeah.
publish it. How do you know? So I think reading, it's right what you are saying.
Mm,
People need to read. If you are
mm,
writing on a specific genre,
mm,
read as well. What has been written in the past
mm,
about it.
mm,
Do that homework yourself as well,
mm.
because then it's easy for people to mimic other people, to write something else that has been written, not to actually be creative and write their own things, which
Mm,
is where now creative writing
exactly.
comes in, where you guys have studied creative
Yes.
writing. It was for that. It was for all those kind of things.
Mm,
How to
mm,
come up with your twist, your
mm,
plots, all those kind of things. So people need to
mm.
actually do
Yeah.
their work and leave this whole thing of anyone can be a writer. I can wake up in the morning and write my thing, and then it can be on
Mm,
on
mm,
on platforms, social media platforms. Now I'm a writer, because that's what we see as readers these days. Everybody starts to
mm,
wake up,
mm,
they become a writer.
mm.
That's what they do. You know,
Yeah.
that's what they
Okay.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is my last question
So,
now.
and then I
Yes.
have a last little bit of advice for people, like you said, that or who are starting out, or I wish
Yes.
I had known earlier, is that it's really, you don't have to do it alone. Something that's been so helpful for me is being in reading, is in writing groups. I was in a writing group for many years where we each trying to work on something, and we would share our chapter or our story, whatever that every week, and then we discuss each other's work every week. And it makes such a big difference to have another set of eyes
Mm.
on what you're working on. So it doesn't
Oh,
have to be
wow.
a solitary
Yes.
thing all the time, you know?
It's more like there's something called white pad. Was white pad. Is it white pad that? What is it? White pad. Yes. Oh, it's not the
Okay,
same
I don't know
thing.
it.
So yeah, but it's not the same thing. So Whitepad is also
Okay.
when people write their stories there, and then people get to read. But it's the readers that actually read there. It's not the
Oh, it's
other.
the
Yeah,
readers. Okay.
yes, the readers they read, and then they give their views, as far as I understand. On whatever
Oh,
chapter,
okay.
whatever it is that you put in there, as you are busy
Yeah.
writing your book. So that's one of
Mm.
the other platform people used to use in the past. I heard from one of the authors. She said she used to write her stories there and get feedback from
Okay.
as she writes. People are giving her feedback.
Yes. Okay. Interesting.
Okay, so
Hmm.
we've come to the end of our podcast, but there is one question that I always ask everybody on this podcast, and I'm going to ask you that question. It comes like this: in 100 years' time, how would Alistair like to be remembered? In 100 years' time, you're gone.
Oh, wow.
What is it that one thing that you will like to be remembered by, like as Alistair? The one thing, that one line.
Sure. That is a tough question. I would like to be remembered as someone who, uh, sure, that's tough, Penny. I think what I hope to do is to make people see the humanity in each other. That's what I
Yes.
would like to do.
That's
Mhm.
actually I was like thinking you'll say more or less the same thing along those lines,
Okay.
because that's what
Yeah.
you've answered that question before, like on your short stories, when I was asking you that your stories, it combines so many things, and at the one word is
Mm,
hope. Your stories is like there's hope,
mm,
in all of them.
mm.
So yes, so
Okay.
that's it's a good answer. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've come to the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for taking time to chat with me. And like I said earlier, you will be in our magazine, and I'm very, very excited. It's gonna hit Cape Town. We're gonna be posting to you, the magazine, and I will be
Amazing.
reaching out to you also to get some more information on your pictures and those kind of things. But yeah, so thank you so much for making time today. We've come to the end of our show. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Please hit your comments, your likes, and please subscribe if you have not subscribed. Tell your friends about our show. And this show is going to be dropped on our YouTube platform this week. So make sure that your notifications are open. You don't want to miss this last episode of our season 2 with Alistair and his journey into writing and everything else that he's still going to do. Will you guys can please, Alistair, before he leaves, Alistair, where can people get your book? Your books, where can they
Oh,
get them?
yeah, they can get my books anywhere. I think Exclusive Books has them, Wordsworth Books, indie bookshops, wherever you are. There are also ebooks available on
Yes.
Kindle, and the child just came out as an audiobook as well. If people like audiobooks, it's also on Audible.
Yes, I have audio people who likes to book club ladies who love audio. So we will be with you
Oh,
on the book club meeting as well. So ladies are gonna get a chance to
amazing.
chat to you as well in July.
Fantastic.
So yeah, so thank you
Fantastic.
so much and have a lovely day, further, Alistair.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
Penny. I love chatting to you.